All right, so boys and girls, before we finish up our reading for the week, day 4, going to town, part 2, I want to go back and look at yesterday's assignment, which was day 3, and let's see if you can check your answers with me, and if you need to change anything, do so. But let's look at number 1. Why do you think Laura's and Mary's faces and ankles are brown at the end of the day? Now, this one doesn't come out and just straightforward tell you the answer. You kind of have to think about it a little bit. So you're thinking it's starting to get warm outside and sunny outside, and what happens when we play out in the sunshine to our face and any part of our body that may be exposed? Now you see what they play in, what they run around in, but they don't have their shoes on, right? So why do you think their faces and their ankles are brown at the end of the day? 2 possible reasons why. What would you think? Think about maybe it's dirty. When you play around outside, you get dirty, especially if you're going around barefoot. They're probably doing a lot of things with their hands because they're building and playing and doing things outside around the trees. And also think about the sunshine. What does it do to our face and our bodies? Remember, we even talked about this in science, about your melanin in your skin. It gets tanner, so you get sun from the sunshine. So something to the effect of their faces and, let's see, how does it ask? Their faces and ankles are brown because of the dirt and sunshine, something like that. Or maybe you've written something different, but it would be, as long as it's a complete sentence and it makes sense, it'll be acceptable. Now look at number 2. Where do the girls have their playhouses? Now look at page 157, and the 3rd paragraph, it comes right out and tells you they had playhouses under, how is that finished? You see it right there? That was an easy one. Now look at number 3. List the animals on the Ingalls farm. And if you turn to page 158, the 2nd paragraph, about middle ways in the book, it talks about all their animals. And it names first the cows. Suki and Rosie are their cows. And then it goes on to say there were 2 little calves in the barnyard, 7 little pigs with the mother hog in the pig pen. So right there, it names each one. Now look at number 4. What was the deer wondering as it looked at Pa? Now Pa tells them about seeing the mother deer and the baby deer. And if you look on page 159, middle ways down, it starts, the sentence starts, and it's a new paragraph. It stood there and looked at me with its large, soft eyes. Here's your answer. Wondering what I was. So the question asks you, what was the deer wondering? Pa tells you what it was wondering. Now number 5 asks, why won't Pa hunt again until the fall? That's answered in the very last paragraph on page 159. No, never, he answered. Nor its Ma, nor its Pa. No more hunting now till all the little wild animals have grown up. So why will Pa not hunt anymore until the fall? Now, look at number 6 and 7. These are multiple choice. Why was it hard for the girls to play going to town? Well, if you look on page 160 in the 2nd paragraph, that very last sentence says, they knew there was a store in town, but what's the answer? They had what? Never what? You mark the correct answer there. Number 7, as the wagon nears the town, how does the road change? If you look on page 163, middle of the paragraph, it starts talking about the town of Pepin and Lake Pepin, and then it says, after a long time, Laura began to see glimpses of blue water between the trees, and then it says something about the hard road and what it turns into. So there's where you'll find your answers for yesterday. Now, we're going to start today looking at day 4. We want to read over our questions, put your good detective hats on, and get your tracking finger out, and let's look at these together. Why is it hard for Laura to climb the steps to the store in Pepin? Number 2, how does the storekeeper know Pa? Number 3, which of the following is not sold in the store? Shoes, toys, tools, or fabric? Number 4, what does the storekeeper give Mary and Laura when they leave the store? Number 5, what is a reason it may have been hard for Laura to say thank you to the storekeeper? Number 6, what is printed on Laura's piece of candy? Number 7, why does Laura's pocket rip? And number 7, why does Pa say that Laura was greedy? That wasn't a very nice thing to say. I wonder what she did. Well, we're going to find out. So turn with me then to page 167. Let's see here. Actually, 168. I'm going to start my sentence, the last sentence on 167, and we'll go right to the top of 168. Tracking fingers. The storekeeper came out from behind the counter and spoke to him and to Ma, and then Laura and Mary had to show their manners. Mary said, "How do you do?" But Laura could not say anything. The storekeeper said to Pa and Ma, "That's a pretty little girl you've got there," and he admired Mary's golden curls. But he did not say anything about Laura or about her curls. They were ugly and brown. The store was full of things to look at. All along one side of it were shelves full of colored prints and calicos. There were beautiful pinks and blues and reds and browns and purples. On the floor along the sides of the plank counters there were kegs of nails and kegs of round gray shot, and there were big wooden pails full of candy. There were sacks of salt and sacks of store sugar. In the middle of the store was a plow made of shiny wood with a glittering bright plowshare, and there were steel axe heads and hammer heads and saws and all kinds of knives, hunting knives and shining knives and butcher knives and jackknives. There were big boots and little boots, big shoes and little shoes. Laura could have looked for weeks and not seen all the things that were in that store. She had not known there were so many things in the world. Pa and Ma traded for a long time. The storekeeper took down bolts and bolts of beautiful calicos and spread them out for Ma to finger and look at and price. Laura and Mary looked, but must not touch. Every new color and pattern was prettier than the last, and there were so many of them. Laura did not know how Ma could ever choose. Ma chose 2 patterns of calico to make shirts for Pa and a piece of brown denim to make him a jumper. Then she got some white cloth to make sheets and underwear. Pa got enough calico to make Ma a new apron. Ma said, "Oh, no, Charles, I don't really need it." But Pa laughed and said she must pick it out or he would get her the turkey red piece with the big yellow pattern. Ma smiled and flushed pink, and she picked out a pattern of rosebuds and leaves on a soft fawn-colored ground. Then Pa got for himself a pair of galluses and some tobacco to smoke in his pipe, and Ma got a pound of tea and a little paper package of store sugar to have in the house when company came. It was a pale brown sugar, not dark brown like the maple sugar Ma used for every day. When all the trading was done, the storekeeper gave Mary and Laura each a piece of candy. They were so astonished and so pleased that they just stood looking at their candies. Then Mary remembered and said, "Thank you." Laura could not speak. Everybody was waiting, and she could not make a sound. Ma had to ask her, "What do you say, Laura?" Then Laura opened her mouth and gulped and whispered, "Thank you." After they went out of the store, both pieces of candy were white and flat and thin and heart-shaped. There was printing on them in red letters. Ma read it for them. Mary said, "Roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you." Laura said only, "Sweets to the sweet." The pieces of candy were exactly the same size. Laura's printing was larger than Mary's. They all went back through the sand to the wagon on the lake shore. Pa fed the horses on the bottom of the wagon box some oats he had brought for their dinner. Ma opened the picnic box. They all sat on the warm sand near the wagon and ate bread and butter and cheese, hard-boiled eggs and cookies. The waves of Lake Pepin curled up on the shore at their feet and slid back with the smallest hissing sound. After dinner, Pa went back to the store to talk a while with other men. Ma sat holding Carrie quietly until she went to sleep, but Laura and Mary ran along the lake shore, picking up pretty pebbles that had been rolled back and forth by the waves until they were polished smooth. There were no pebbles like that in the big woods. When she found a pretty one, Laura put it in her pocket, and there were so many, each prettier than the last, that she filled her pocket full. Then Pa called, and they ran back to the wagon, for the horses were hitched up and it was time to go. Laura was so happy when she ran through the sand to Pa, with all those beautiful pebbles in her pocket. But when Pa picked her up and tossed her into the wagon, a dreadful thing happened. The heavy pebbles tore her pocket right out of her dress. The pocket fell and the pebbles rolled all over the bottom of the wagon. Laura cried because she had torn her best dress. Ma gave Carrie to Pa and came quickly to look at the torn place. Then she said it was all right. "Stop crying, Laura," she said. "I can fix it." She showed Laura that the dress was not torn at all, nor the pocket. The pocket was a little bag sewed into the seam of the dress skirt and hanging under it. Only the seams had ripped. Ma could sew the pocket in again, as good as new. "Pick up the pretty pebbles, Laura," Ma said, "and another time, don't be so greedy." So Laura gathered up the pebbles, put them in the pocket, and carried the pocket in her lap. She did not mind very much when Pa laughed at her for being such a greedy little girl that she took more than she should carry away. Nothing like that had ever happened to Mary. Mary was a good little girl who always kept her dress clean and neat and minded her manners. Mary had lovely golden curls, and her candy heart had a poem on it. Mary looked very good and sweet, unrumpled and clean, sitting on the board beside Laura. Laura did not think it was fair. But it had been a wonderful day, the most wonderful day in her whole life. She thought about the beautiful lake and the town she had seen, and the big store full of so many things. She held the pebbles carefully in her lap, and her candy heart wrapped carefully in her handkerchief, until she got home and could put it away to keep always. It was too pretty to eat. The wagon jolted along on the homeward road through the big woods. The sun set and the woods grew darker, but before the last of the twilight was gone, the moon rose, and they were safe because Pa had his gun. The soft moonlight came down through the treetops and made patches of light and shade on the road ahead. The horses' hooves made a cheerful clippity-clop. Laura and Mary did not say anything because they were very tired, and Ma sat silently holding baby Carrie sleeping in her arms. But Pa sang softly, "Mid pleasures and palaces though we may roam, but it ever so humble, there's no place like home." All right, boys and girls, now I want you to take your time. I want you to look at day 4 comprehension questions, and I want you to be the good detectives and find the answers, answer them in complete sentences. Love you bunches.